Okay, so I think we're gonna kick off. It's 11:31, so we'll get started. So good morning, everyone. My name is Elise, and I'm the partner manager here at EzzyBills. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we begin, EzzyBills would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, especially given how close we are to end of financial year. Everyone really shows that e-invoicing is becoming a more important topic and something that we are all keen to learn more about. However, I will leave the topic of e-invoicing to our presenters and share a little bit more about EzzyBills for those of you who are not familiar with what we do. EzzyBills was founded over 6 years ago with the goal of automating data extraction from all PDF and paper invoices into accounting, project management, and inventory management software. As the business has grown, we've incorporated this functionality into automating the accounts payable workflow with functionality including management approvals, price and audit checking, and statement reconciliation. And of course, we are officially launching our e-invoicing functionality, which will allow EzzyBills customers to receive invoices from their suppliers. We are fortunate today to be joined by Natasha Bowett and Perry Leolios from the ATO, who will share a little bit more about the history of e-invoicing in Australia and the benefits to your clients' businesses. Following their presentation, Michael Fitzmaurice, co-founder of EzzyBills, will provide a short demo of how you can enable e-invoicing in any active EzzyBills account. During the presentations, feel free to type your questions into the chat, and I will moderate the Q&A session at the end. By way of introduction, here's some more information about the speakers we'll be hearing from today. Natasha Bowett has led the stakeholder engagement work on several government initiatives, delivering major transformational digital change across Australia, including single-touch payroll and now e-invoicing. As the Australian Taxation's Office e-invoicing business engagement lead, Natasha works with software providers, businesses, and industry associations to raise awareness of and drive e-invoicing take-up across the Australian business community. Natasha's career has always been driven by the belief that she can positively influence people's attitudes and behavior towards the way they work, live, and the environment that sustains them. This belief is reflected in her Master of Business Administration, which focused on corporate social responsibility, as well as her former career as a print and broadcast journalist working for media outlets such as the BBC and UK Daily Mail. Perry Leolios is passionate about informing, driving, and supporting digital transformation within the Australian government and business community. He first started in the e-invoicing space in 2016 and is currently the acting director, leading e-invoicing adoption for the Australian Pebble Authority. Within the Australian e-invoicing landscape, Perry works closely with all levels of government, the software industry, business and finance advisors, and industry associations and peak bodies. On the international stage, Perry regularly meets with government representatives from New Zealand, Singapore, Canada, and Japan. Most recently, Perry has been instrumental in implementing the government 5-day payments policy, the mandate for federal government agencies to become e-invoicing enabled. He also works with software providers to deliver e-invoicing capable solutions, all of which are geared towards supporting small businesses within the broader Australian economy. Over to you guys.
Thanks very much, Elise. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and speak to you today. As mentioned in Elise's introduction, my name is Perry Leolios, and I'm the Director for e-invoicing adoption, and I'm joined by my colleague, Natasha Bowett, who's our business engagement lead, who's mainly responsible for raising awareness amongst small businesses and advisors. Today's session, I'll cover a couple of topics, and that will be what is e-invoicing? What are some of the drivers for e-invoicing in Australia? What are some of the benefits? And what's going on in the government policy space? Following that, Tash will give us recent progress to date of how the e-invoicing project's going, including our recent small business survey, our business.gov web content, and how the market is progressing. One moment, sorry, just shifting slides. I think I've lost control. There we go. All right, to begin with, just a bit of a snapshot about the current invoicing landscape in Australia. The ATO had Deloitte Access Economics conduct a study a few years ago where it was estimated that currently there are 1.2 billion invoices exchanged annually in Australia. Approximately 89% of small and medium business invoices are processed manually, and this equates to billions of dollars and thousands of hours of labour going into it. There is also a high number of invoices we found that contain errors, which include wrong data, wrong pay information, or just go to the completely wrong person. Unfortunately, incorrect invoices often lead to payment times. On average, Australian SMEs are paid 9 days late, which impact their own ability to pay their trading partners on time. We've got some larger organisations that have already implemented their own form of e-invoicing called EDI, but unfortunately, sometimes is the case that this is imposing additional effort or cost to the small business community. My apologies, I think I've lost the ability to jump through the slides. Just the next slide, please. Now, cue where e-invoicing comes in. E-invoicing enables suppliers and buyers software to exchange invoice with much fewer steps. E-invoicing is the automated, secure exchange of invoice information directly between buyers and suppliers' business software via our network. This is all made possible by introducing an agreed standard for how different systems are able to communicate with each other. While e-invoicing improves the sending and receiving of invoice data, what it won't do is take control from you on how you process an invoice, the workflows, approvals, and the payment stages. It's also important to understand what we're not referring to when we're using our definition of e-invoicing. E-invoicing, we're not calling at the moment an emailed PDF, and also with our definition of what we're moving forward to with Pebble e-invoicing, not scanned or OCR'd invoices. So, another misperception is that e-invoicing is not a system that would automatically process an invoice and not the system that would pay the invoice. What we're using our definition is that direct channel between business systems. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a little earlier that what we're doing with Pebble e-invoicing is enabled by standards. And to really scope out that, back in 2018, the government asked the ATO to investigate what are some, beyond the domestic market, what's going on in the procure-to-pay space in a global sense. Following a scoping exercise, we made the decision that we put to government was to adopt the Pebble framework. But what is the Pebble framework? The Pebble framework is largely made up of 3 core components. And after I explain them now, you won't need to know. All you'll need to know is Pebble just works by the help of the wonderful providers we've got. So firstly is a set of open international standards, which allow all the systems to speak the same language. Secondly is the Pebble network, where buyers and suppliers can exchange invoice information between each other and other procure-to-pay documents. And third is the governance arrangements to make sure that it all works and it's all secure. The Pebble network is 13 years mature and is currently used by 34 different countries. We're also witnessing extensive growth in the Asia Pacific region, and we expect to see that 34 rise over the next few years. I'll just skip next slide, please. Now, so what are some of the benefits for clients to do e-invoicing? First off is the efficiencies. The study I mentioned earlier from Deloitte Access Economics estimated the time to receive, produce, receive, send, and process an invoice could be approximately $30.87 per invoice. That same study estimated that the cost to receive an automated e-invoice is as little as $9.18. Other studies we've seen around the world are consistently estimating approximately 60 to 80% efficiency savings on when doing e-invoicing. E-invoicing is also a catalyst for faster payments. About 18 months ago, the Commonwealth Government announced a 5-day payment policy for when any business was able to send an eligible Pebble e-invoice to the government, we would pay in 5 days. New South Wales Government has launched a similar payment policy for small businesses, and we're hoping to see some of the other states and territories follow. There's also less complexity with e-invoicing. As you can use the business software or systems of your choice, you're using something you're more familiar and comfortable with. The e-invoicing network is reliable and secure. This is enabled by, we're using ABNs for the addressing service, so they're linking up to a specific business. We've got a 24/7 available live network, and as the data is going directly straight from system to system, we're reducing the risk of email fraud or ransomware attacks from emails. Finally, one of the benefits I'd like to highlight is e-invoicing is better for the environment. As we're heading to a paperless world, and particularly with the COVID environment, how everything's virtual, really heading away from that paper PDF pathway is the way forward. Next slide, please. So, why is the federal government driving e-invoicing? First off is the AP efficiencies. I mentioned the savings to small businesses earlier. The government truly believes that if small businesses have the opportunity to reap some of the efficiency benefits from e-invoicing, they can spend more time focusing on running the business, which is what's important for them. Earlier, I mentioned late payments. To put a bit of a number to the late payments issue, collectively small businesses are owed approximately $26 billion at any time in unpaid invoices. Interestingly enough, we've also tested some numbers with the US Business Payments Coalition, and their studies have found that approximately 92% of e-invoices are paid on time. So even just getting some gradual improvements on the payment times across Australia will have a big impact on cutting down that $26 billion number. In Australia, the e-invoicing team has already conducted a successful pilot with BOC, and already from e-invoicing, we're experiencing a 7-day improvement on payment terms. The third driver I'd like to talk about is the market imbalance. Right now, as often is the case, many of the large businesses have implemented their own e-invoicing solutions called EDI solutions. And unfortunately, what's happening is small businesses are either need to integrate with that large partner or jump off their software of choice and jump onto a portal. The problem is if you're dealing with many large players, that could result in you having to deal with multiple different portals at the same time or different software or lots of different costs. What we're implementing with Pebble invoicing is allowing you to use your business systems or provider of choice and connect with anyone on our network. The fourth driver is the government's push for digitising business community. We know that digitally enabled businesses are more likely to succeed. The advantage for businesses being digital enabled is there is a whole set of other benefits of using the software beyond just e-invoicing and lots of other efficiency capabilities you can acquire. Next slide, please. The most common question I get asked about e-invoicing is, why is the ATO doing this, or why is the ATO involved? First and foremost, I might clarify, we cannot see your invoice data, and the invoice data in the network goes from business system to business system, not via the ATO. Our role in Pebble e-invoicing is in our capacity as the Australian Pebble Authority. What does that mean we do? We manage the invoice standards for Australia. We manage the governance of the network, which includes the accreditation of service providers and managing the security protocols. We drive adoption amongst federal, state, and local government agencies, and we support small businesses and large businesses with the awareness and the adoption of e-invoicing. It's probably also worth touching on the ATO has experience working with the software industry on dealing similar initiatives such as single touch payroll or SuperStream. Just over to the next slide, please. Now, just a bit of a brief timeline on how we've gotten here in a policy sense and what direction things are going. Probably most importantly was back in 2018 as part of the Single Economic Market Agenda. Ministers in Australia and New Zealand decided that the two countries would work together on delivering a common invoicing standard in Australia and New Zealand. Oh, just jump back one, thank you. What that resulted in is in February 2019, Scott Morrison and Jacinda Ardern in a joint announcement announcing the two countries' decision to adopt the Pebble framework, which in late 2019, law was passed that enabled the ATO to become the Australian Pebble Authority. Jumping forward a few years, at the last budget, the budget last year, we had the mandate announced, which will force all Commonwealth government agencies to be enabled by 1 July 2022, with approximately 34 of those to be enabled in 2-3 days. New South Wales government has also followed and announced a mandate, and by 1 January 2022, all New South Wales government agencies will also be Pebble enabled. So it's definitely gaining plenty of momentum around government. At the most recent budget, in May this year, the initiative was given $15.3 million to continue another 3 more years in driving e-invoicing adoption. I might jump to the next slide, please. Now, what does that entail, the most recent budget measure that I've just shared on the previous slide? First off, it's part of government's digital economy strategy, and it's part of the sub-theme of work, which is SME digitisation. Now, over the next 3 years, the ATO will deliver on a range of key themes under that budget. The first is a series of e-invoicing pilots, where we want to test beyond invoicing other procure-to-pay documents, large business to small, different industries, and just lots of different use cases to show the feasibility of e-invoicing across different industries and the benefits that it entails. The next is we'll continue, as we've done with federal the previous 12 months, to work with state and territories and local government to really drive and increase public sector adoption. Following in the pattern from Europe, where all the EU now does Pebble e-invoicing for their public sector procurement. The third and probably the most prominent component of what we're looking to do in the next few years is the educational activities to raise business awareness for e-invoicing. What does that include? That will be things such as promotion, roadshows, webinars, participation at events and forums, and really just working with the service providers and the intermediaries to get that e-invoicing awareness and messaging out to help the business community become enabled. Next thing we're working on is working with payment providers, because while we acknowledge that the invoice interaction is one component, there is still the relevant payment systems. And what we'd like to see in the future is seamless interactions where it comes through the e-invoicing network and can go through relevant payment networks, seamless transaction for all parties involved. And the fifth and final thing I'll share is the government plan to shortly go out for further consultation on potential regulatory and non-regulatory ways to accelerate e-invoicing adoption. That will be run by Treasury, not the ATO, and anyone interested in e-invoicing, I encourage you to get involved, review the paper and provide some commentary. It's probably all I've got for the initial introduction on e-invoicing and what's been going on, what is and what's happening on a global sense. I'll now pass on to Natasha to give us a bit of a progress update. Thanks, Tash.
Thanks, Perry, and thanks to everyone for giving Perry and I the opportunity to talk to you all this morning on all things e-invoicing. Before I give you a bit of a progress update, I just wanted to touch on some small business research that we did earlier this year. Now, the aim of the research was twofold. Firstly, to better understand how small businesses are actually invoicing today. This would allow us, amongst other things, to develop invoicing process models, and I'll talk more about those in a moment. Once developed, those models, we could then identify the impact of e-invoicing on each one of those models. We would then, from a marketing communications perspective, be able to tailor our information, including the how to become e-invoicing enabled for each one of those models. The second purpose of that research was to give small businesses an opportunity to user test our current web content on ato.gov.au. Now you'll see from this slide, we had around 90 small businesses that responded to the survey. The majority had up to 9 employees with a turnover of less than 2 million, with more than half having been in business for more than 10 years. The majority sent and received up to 10 invoices a month, with 84% using accounting software, with 85% of which actually using that software for their invoicing. From the survey, we developed our high-level invoicing process models, 3 in fact, which we've called fully digital is the first one, and that's where businesses are using some form of accounting software. Manual is when they are not using any software and they're doing their invoicing completely manually. And hybrid, as the name suggests, is a combination of software and manual processes. Next slide, please. This next slide delves a little bit deeper into those survey results. And I think it's important to note that the results and this research actually underpinned all of our marketing and communications development that we've since been working on. So I won't go through all of the things on this slide, but I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of points of interest. Firstly, according to our research, it's actually the business owners who said they're the ones mainly doing their businesses invoicing, with a majority spending on average up to 2 hours per week. I've already touched on the software usage in the previous slide, but it's still, it's safe to say that the most prevalent form of invoicing is still paper-based, which includes email and PDF. As part of the research and the change sort of impact assessment that we did on the back of that research, we actually analysed what the impact of the change would be on the small businesses that we surveyed. And that analysis sort of showed that the change for those small businesses would be on a scale from very little if they're using a small business accounting package that is about to become e-invoicing enabled, to something a little bit larger for those that don't use any software but still want to become e-invoicing enabled. Next slide, please. And to the second part of the research, the user testing, what did businesses say that they actually wanted from our content? Ultimately, they want tailored content based upon what they're actually doing today. And they want that content to include the change impacts and how to become enabled, as well as potentially how they can onboard their suppliers and their other trading partners. The small businesses also said that promotion is key. Many said that they hadn't heard of e-invoicing, but if they had, it is definitely something that they would like to start doing. They also told us that they wanted our content, our small business content, to be hosted where those small businesses actually go to get their business information. So on this point, small businesses, as well as other e-invoicing stakeholders, including business advisors and accountants such as yourselves, have actually told us that they are concerned about the ATO's involvement in e-invoicing. They fear that it is something that the ATO is doing to them for compliance reasons. But I know Perry, in his part of the presentation, sort of outlined exactly the reasons why the ATO is leading this work. However, to address the small business and those other stakeholders' concerns, we're actually currently working with the Department of Industry to host the new content that we're developing on the back of the research, as well as developing some how-to videos and hosting them on Department of Industry's business.gov. which is web content that we are aiming to launch towards the end of July. And once we've launched that content, you'll be able to find it on business.gov.au/e-invoicing. In addition to the new, if we could just go back to the previous slide. In addition to the small business content that we're developing, we are also looking at the intermediary and business advisor content that we have on ato.gov with a view to revamping that and launching it at the same time as we launch our small business content on business.gov. Once the content on both business.gov and ato.gov go live, we will be doing a major communications and promotional drive and push, initially to bookkeepers and accountants like yourselves, directly with you, but also through your associations and peak bodies, but also your digital service providers such as EasyDocs. And once we've done that, we will actually be going out to small businesses via those intermediaries and directly to small businesses later on in the year. Now, next slide. So to help us drive e-invoicing adoption across the Australian economy, there are a number of other things that we've also been working on. Earlier this year, we actually established our Invoicing Champions Adoption Network. This is a network that is made up of a group of senior industry representatives, predominantly C-suite and board members, who we found from large and small business sectors, from digital service providers and influencers, from a diverse set of industries who are all very keen to help us drive both the awareness of e-invoicing, but also the adoption of e-invoicing. Perry's already touched on the budget and on the ongoing government consultation, but on the government progress to date, as he said earlier, we've got federal government agencies that are mandated to begin e-invoicing from July 1st this year, with the majority then having to be enabled by the 1st of July next year. To date, in terms of progress, we've got 13 federal government agencies that are already enabled. And those agencies include the ATO, Services Australia, Treasury, and the Department of Finance. And if you're interested in the full list of those agencies, you'll be able to find them on ato.gov.au/e-invoicing. In addition, we've also got around 44 New South Wales government agencies that are already e-invoicing enabled. Perry touched on our pilots. He touched on the pilot with BOC and the impacts on payment times. We're actually running a number of pilots with a number of large business and service providers and some of their small business customers. And all of those pilots are tracking well. And we will be using some of those pilots as case studies later on in the year. And finally, one of the other burning questions that we're often asked is, where are we up to with the software? When will the e-invoicing functionality actually be available in accounting software? The good news is most of the major accounting software providers are in the process of gradually adding e-invoicing functionality to their software. And in addition, we've got the ATO, which has accredited more than 27 access points. And it's those access points, particularly for those small businesses that aren't using software or aren't using software that is yet e-invoicing enabled. They'll be able to pick from those 27 accredited access points and will actually be able to start e-invoicing from today. And for fear of plugging the ATO website once again, for that list of 27 accredited access points, you'll be able to go to ato.gov.au/e-invoicing. And just on those access points, the other good news is many of them are offering actually free or low cost portal solutions, which, as I said, will allow small businesses to start e-invoicing today if they wanted to. In terms of the numbers of businesses that have actually registered for e-invoicing, those numbers are also starting to steadily grow. In fact, since we started recording those numbers, the numbers of businesses that have registered for e-invoicing has grown exponentially by 2,000% from February to June of this year. That means now almost 4,000 businesses have actually registered to start using e-invoicing. So I think Perry and Elise, that's probably a positive note upon which to finish this part of the presentation, and perhaps open to the floor for any questions.
Right, thanks so much.
Elise, I was hoping to finish up the EzzyBills side of things before the Q&A.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Was just gonna thank Perry and Natasha for that. It was definitely an informative presentation. I know I definitely learned a lot. The stats and sort of case studies were really interesting to learn more about. And yeah, I'm just gonna hand the floor over to Michael, who's gonna give us a short demo about e-invoicing during EzzyBills. I have seen some people start popping Q&A into the chat, which is great. Feel free to continue doing that while Michael is speaking, and then I will start taking some questions at the end.
And you can see my screen now, Elise?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, hello everybody. Good afternoon. So thank you very much, Perry and Natasha. I think it's been a real benefit for anyone on the webinar to listen to your presentation. And you know, I think it's going to be something very important in the future. I certainly believe that, and EzzyBills believes that. And so what I thought I wanted to do is actually, most of the people on the call would be accountants, and most of them probably use EzzyBills, and they want to know how the process, the paper process right now, or the PDF process now, how it changes, how e-invoice is going to be different. And so that's what I really wanted to just quickly show. So currently, if you're using EzzyBills, you'd set up an account, and your business would be connected to EzzyBills, and you would upload your bills to EzzyBills. So you might come in here and say drag and drop a PDF, and you might actually just email in the PDF, or the suppliers might email in the PDF. So they're the two most common ways that you're receiving your bills. And in the case of e-invoicing applies to both the sending and the receiving. For most of the audience, it's the receiving that's most important to you, where you're receiving bills from suppliers like Woolworths or Bunnings or Coles, big suppliers, big food suppliers, etc. So so this is how you currently do it. You upload your bills to EzzyBills. EzzyBills extracts the details off the PDF, and then we put it into the accounting system. And it takes about 30 seconds to do that. So this is the one that we just did. And so if we come in here and actually have a look at the workflow that I've got set up. So in this workflow, the document comes in and we're pushing it in this case, Xero, but it could be any of the accounting systems. And I can come over here and open it up in the accounting system, and I'll see all the details. So that's how people are currently using EzzyBills. And the same, this one here was emailed in. So we've got drag and drop, we've got email. So the question is, where does e-invoicing come in? And that's really what I wanted to cover here. So the way Perry described it was that, right, there's a network out there, it's the Pebble network. And in Australia, there's 27, think of them as nodes or businesses on that network. EzzyBills is one of those nodes on the network. And so when you're sending a bill to someone else, you're putting a document on this network, and when you're receiving a bill from, say, a supplier, they're putting it on the network, and then you're basically pulling it off the network. So it's a closed network. And in the case of EzzyBills, you can actually come into EzzyBills and you can register your ABN. So ABN is the key identifier. So when you register your ABN on the network, then basically any, say any bill from Bunnings would get forwarded, that's sent to you, would basically get sent via your ABN number, and it would come to wherever you've registered your company. And so in this case, I've registered this company at EzzyBills. So I've gone and added the ABN number here. So this account, this EzzyBill account, is actually currently on the network, and anything sent to that ABN number we will receive. And one way to just show you what I mean by this is, so there's actually a directory which shows all companies, say in Australia, that are on the network, and you can go and search for the ABN, and you can find that this NAC Sealing Technologies, it's on this Pebble network, and so it can receive e-invoices, and EzzyBills is registered on the network. So what I'm going to do now is actually send a bill via e-invoicing. So this bill is actually going to come from a company called Fitzmaurice Holding Company, which is one of my companies, conveniently. And so I've just done that. I've just basically sent an e-invoice from my business. It's pretty fast. It comes through into EzzyBills. In the case of this particular workflow, so I've got an e-invoicing workflow. So we've basically read the e-invoice, and now we're going through an approval process. Many of you will be familiar with the approval process in EzzyBills. So we can have a look in here, and we can see that this e-invoice is basically come through. Now, a couple of things I'm sure you're curious about. So the first thing is you're looking at a PDF here. Now that might seem a bit strange, but e-invoicing is think of it as a message that has data in it and also has attachments. So there's nothing stopping you from attaching other documents to an e-invoice. You can attach invoices and other things, and they can get sent and received. And in this case, I'm just displaying this PDF. But if we have a look at the actual data, now this might be a little bit more technical, but this is actually what an e-invoice looks like. It's XML data, but that's what got sent across the network. And so I'm going to approve the invoice now, and it is just going to get exported into the accounting system that I'm currently connected to. So I think what I've done is I've shown you the difference between an e-invoice and just a normal PDF. So the benefits are suppliers. Once a big supplier starts sending you e-invoices, it'll come straight to you. It's not a case of them emailing it to you and you've got to pull it out of your email. It's not a case of a piece of paper or that. It's going to get sent directly from the supplier directly to you, and then into wherever you want it to go. And so that's the big benefit of it. And we can go and have a look at it in Xero as well. So I think it'd be a good opportunity now for, say, Q&A to ask any questions, and we can probably go into a bit more details. Thanks very much. Back to you, Elise.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael, for sharing that and giving us a live demo and some visuals of what those e-invoices actually look like. So the first question is just, can we get the slides after the session? I'm not sure. Great, amazing. So so Perry or Natasha, I'll send those through to me and I'll share those with everyone who attended. Okay, next question. When will local government adopt e-invoicing, and will this be mandatory? Yes,
that's actually a pretty common question. I think a lot of people might have some payment terms back and forth with local government. We've got one local government enabled, but we're in the very early stages, and 4 more are piloting. What I will probably note is the budget last year, there was a measure in there that the Treasurer will consult with state and territories about their own e-invoicing implementations. So I think it's looking like the conversations are heading that they'll go in the same direction as federal government. We've seen New South Wales has done it at their state level now. We've done it at federal. It could be a matter of just when, depending on how consultations go.
Great.
Perry, just a quick question. So in the case of local government, presumably they use a variety of accounting systems, etc. So is it a case of their accounting systems becoming supported, or is there something else standing between them?
I think it's mainly just a timing problem. So what we've experienced with the gradual uptake of e-invoicing is, first and foremost, we've established our network of providers. That's a lot of access points, and people are actually providing e-invoicing solutions. We've tried to kick things off with the federal government mandate, and then we're hoping that will start accelerating adoption. It's a very similar pathway to what was followed in the EU, where they've got their 34 countries now doing e-invoicing that have set up the network, driven it through their service providers, then government. So I think we're just at the early stages of what's a natural progression into getting small business and local government participating as well.
So the next question is just really a follow on for that. Do you think an Australian business mandate e-invoicing adoption will happen? What time horizon might we expect that to happen?
I mentioned earlier the most common question I get asked, which is, why is the ATO involved? This is the second most common question. In that last budget measure, there was the notification on consultation. I think the important message from that is that the business community actually gets to have their say on when, why, what, how it happens, if it happens. So that will be one that Treasury will be conducting absent of the ATO, but everyone will get their chance to share their opinion on it.
Great, thanks. Does the Pebble standard support the conveyance of attachments, i.e. documents, to invoice data?
The Pebble standard does. Each software solution will decide whether they implement that capability or that component of it. But the standard definitely supports attachments.
Great.
Yeah, and that was part of what I showed before as well. That was a PDF that was attached to the XML or the e-invoice. Yeah, I would expect it to be common.
Next question. E-invoicing sounds like a no-brainer. What are the main barriers for SMEs to adopt the technology?
So I think I touched on some of it earlier, but one thing is we've just finally hit a good position where we've got a range of software solutions available to cater to different types of business needs. The next two items is awareness. So we definitely, and that's what we're starting to push now with some of these campaigns and the work and the education materials Tash was talking about. And the third is creating a network effect. The analogy I like to use is when email first came in, I'm sure it was a lot harder to, like more people were still sending faxes because more people could send and receive faxes. So it's just a matter of transition, and that's why we're trying to push the public sector procurement, because it's a lot easier to put some of those rules and policies, and that'll get better incentives for businesses to come on, such as the 5-day payments.
Makes sense.
And Perry, I think it's just worth noting, and I'll just reiterate what I said in my part of the presentation, there are no and low cost solutions already out there. So, you know, even for those small businesses that aren't using any form of accounting software.
Does the Pebble standard support the notification of payment provider options?
Within the standard, we've got a series of Pebble-enabled documents. One of them is the invoice response, which can do the yes, I've got the invoice, yes, I've processed, or yes, I've paid. We're also looking at the feasibility of adopting a remittance advice document. But the other thing to note is there could be better benefit to business with, I mentioned earlier, the synergies with the payment systems providers. So maybe it's not through the Pebble network you get the notification. It's all the same software is connected to the Pebble network and the payments network, and it's all happening in the background, absent of the businesses knowing that there's different networks. So I think we're heading towards a much more seamless future.
Great. And just a note, I've got a couple more questions, but if anybody else has questions and are wondering whether we're going to get to them, if you pop them in the chat, we will probably have time for a bunch more. Will retailers, i.e. Coles, Woolworths, Aldi, be part of e-invoicing, given that their customer base is mainly consumers?
Tash, did you want to take that one? Or
yes, I'll jump on this one. We're actually working very closely with Coles and Woolworths as we speak. And you heard me touch on our e-invoicing champions adoption network, as well as the pilots. Where both Coles and Woolworths are part of what we call the CAN, the Champions Adoption Network, as well as we're working with them on pilots as well. Aldi is an organisation yet we haven't had much contact with, but is definitely on our list of retailers.
Right. If multiple software companies, i.e. EzzyBills, Xero, MyOb, register the same ABN, will they all receive a copy of the data?
So,
I can take that one if you want.
Thanks,
yeah.
Michael. Didn't want to speak on anyone's
I really
behalf.
wanted to. Yeah, so the answer is that think of the network as being, you can only be on one, like a one provider. So you'd either be on EzzyBills or Xero or MyOb. And the way the network works is you register yourself. And then in the case of EzzyBills, if you wanted to move to a different provider, then you would have to come in and remove yourself from, say, the network. So remove yourself from the network, and then you would be able to add yourself to, say, Xero or MyOb. So only one provider, you can only be associated with one provider. So it's like a uniqueness requirement. So to answer your question, that will never occur. You can only be registered in one place, and that's where the bill will go.
Right, thanks, Michael. What about the statements received from the suppliers aside from invoices? Would that apply to e-invoicing as well?
Apologies, what was that one?
So they're asking about statements as opposed to invoices. The suppliers would send a statement at the end of the quarter or whatever.
I probably don't want to jump on any of our techies' feet on that one, but anything that could be seen as an invoice equivalent, we could be able to map to the standard, and we can do attachments. But unfortunately, I might have to take that one on notice unless Michael had any extra insight on that one.
Yes, from a standard perspective, there's a concept of a document type, and whether or not statements are supported document type, they probably are. But they're probably not part of the current adopted standard. So in the future, I'm sure statements along with delivery notes, all sorts of things would be part of the network. But currently, it'll be just invoices, and probably purchase orders would be the next most common.
And invoice response.
Yeah,
that one I think we'll see another big push. So that way the suppliers are also getting that immediate notification of success or received.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, this is, I guess, a bit of a more specific question, but I'm from KPMG with a remit to help improving and digitizing SMEs. What roles should we be playing in the broader business adoption of e-invoicing?
Tash, do you want
I think
that
the starting point is probably having a discussion with me. Yes, so whomever that's from, I would love to have a chat with them outside of this, this presentation. And I would love to explore that.
Great, thank you.
Well, we can forward. That's from Tyson, so I can forward you his
Yeah.
contact details, Natasha. So.
Hi, Tyson. Yes, I think he's just connected with me via LinkedIn.
Okay.
Great. Well, look, if nothing else, we've
not
been able
wasting
to,
any time.
yeah, if nothing else, we've been able to make some great connections, which I think is always a really great outcome of these kinds of events as well.
Agreed.
So I don't have any other questions in the chat for now. So if you
there's in the Q&A section, there's a couple
Yeah.
of unanswered questions in there.
Sorry,
Right at the
there's one more
bottom.
there.
Oh
There's
yeah,
one more,
so
sorry. How can I send the e-invoice from one software and receive from another?
I think Michael touched on it earlier. It's those nodes or the access points that connect you to the network. So they're enabling just any solution to connect to any other as long as they've got that accredited service provider somewhere in the link. I don't know if I answered that one as comprehensive as I should have.
So I guess what you could say is that in 6 months' time, it'll be completely obvious because pretty much all systems are going to have some kind of e-invoicing connectivity. Right now, you will need to talk to someone like EzzyBills or another access point if you want to send and receive. That's basically the answer right now.
Great. Okay, so that I think is all of the questions in the Q&A in the chat. Like I said, last chance to get in, and while I'm giving people sort of a last chance to get in with their Q&A, happy to pass it back over to the panelists if you've got any final words of wisdom to share with us. No.
Actually, whilst they're doing that, I might just once again plug those two web addresses. Really check out, for your business clients, business.gov.au/e-invoicing from the beginning of August, and ato.gov.au/e-invoicing for our updated intermediary and business advisor content at the same time. Hopefully, that's what we're working towards.
Great.
Yeah, I guess the final thing I would say is that certainly in the case of most of the people on the call who are accountants and bookkeepers, the trigger point that's going to make e-invoicing so important to you is when the big suppliers, so the businesses you work with, they will have a few big suppliers and you'll be receiving huge volumes of invoices from them, probably PDFs right now. In the space of a few months, they're going to start sending e-invoices, and that's when it's going to change everything for you. So you'll want to have a solution in place where you can receive those e-invoices. It will create a much simpler system, accounts payable system for you.
Great, thanks so much. So I think we're gonna leave it at that. So thank you so much again to Natasha and Perry from the ATO and for Michael for showing us the e-invoicing in EzzyBills. As always, feel free to reach out to us at EzzyBills if you have any questions or there's anything that we can do to help. And as Michael mentioned, we're looking forward to continuing the conversation as this becomes more relevant, as some of the major suppliers do start rolling out